Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a whole line of questioning, but given the time, I'm going to limit it just to two that caused some head shaking by people who testified when Ms. Jennings testified. The first is for you, Ms. Landis. When you testified pretty adamantly that nobody from Hamburg Center ended up in prison or in the streets, I don't think it could be denied that some ended up in the morgue. When Ms. Jennings testified and said there was 15 of 80, you pretty vehemently shook your head no. So I'm going to give you the opportunity now to tell us why you were shaking your head no, and if you have a different number than that, please share it with us.
It's not about different numbers, Representative. It's about the average fatality with the people who live in state centers is approximately 5 a year. So when you take 36 months, it's 3 years times 5 is 15.
Okay. You are not in any way insinuating that transfer trauma is not real and will not have an effect on the people at Whitehaven Center or Polk Center, are you?
I'm not saying that transfer trauma is not real. I'm not a physician, and I can't say that it would. It's a possibility, yes.
You were present at the Senate hearing. We did have a physician there, and he talked about how real it was and the estimated number of deaths that would be expedited by the move, correct?
I was correct because we were the only two. I was one of 2 advocacy organizations that was allowed to testify at the Senate hearing.
Given your extensive history in this field, what has been your experience in the rate of transfer trauma with closures of this type?
I don't have an extensive experience in this field.
Does the ARC have an acceptable number or an acceptable percentage of transfer trauma deaths in the name of full community inclusion that is acceptable to the ARC?
Representative, I mean, no, there is no acceptable number of deaths, but look at the average age of people who live at the state centers, and some of these people are going to pass away. It's part of life. To directly point the finger at transfer trauma, I think we're all taking a stab in the dark. We're all looking at the numbers the way that we want to look at them.
Thank you.
I would be happy to.
I'm getting you next. The second head shaking I saw occurred when Ms. Jennings referenced Secretary Miller's work in Oregon. A quick LinkedIn check will confirm that both you and Secretary Miller had extensive work history in Oregon. So why, on her testimony to that, was your head shaking so much?
To my knowledge, Secretary Miller didn't work on ICF issues in Oregon. I did work on ICF issues in Oregon in the late 80s, early 90s.
And the SIS assessments that are being performed right now in the Commonwealth are being performed by Kepro, correct?
That's correct.
Are you aware that Kepro was the agency hired to perform the SIS assessments in Oregon?
I was not.
Okay. Are you aware that in Oregon right now there are multiple lawsuits against the state of Oregon and Kepro for the way they are handling the SIS assessments?
I am not, and I'd like to know what that has to do with what's happening here with SIS assessments.
Oh, I mean, are you aware that every SIS assessment that was completed by Kepro in Oregon that has been challenged has been overturned? In short, what I'm saying is that every assessment done by Kepro in Oregon that said a patient's service could be provided in the community upon more closer inspection was deemed that it could not. Are you aware of that?
So Kepro does not make recommendations for the state of Pennsylvania. For our contract with Kepro is for them to administer a standardized normed instrument called the Supports Intensity Scale. We do this to the tune of about 1,000 people in our community settings each month. We have been applying this across our service system, including state centers. It is an assessment used in 20 states internationally that gives us a standardized way of looking at an individual's needs. It does not tell us how to meet those needs or where to meet those needs.
My last thing isn't a question, it's more of a comment. To hear you, Ms. Ahrens, talk about the factors that went into the consideration for these closures is extremely disingenuous. I mean, it is crystal clear, and I believe it was stated at a meeting in Whitehaven, that the reason for these closures has nothing to do with budget. So to hide behind budgetary numbers is again, the only word I can come up with here in a polite manner is disingenuous. This is a philosophical decision. I mean, is that something that you're willing to stand by today, that it is the philosophy of this administration that people should not be treated in institutional care, that they should be treated in the community, and this has nothing to do with budget?
Ultimately, the Wolf administration has been very clear that philosophically, yes, people should be served in their communities, close to their families. That was the driving force behind the decision here, driving force behind the decision to close Hamburg as well, driving force behind the incredible waiting list initiatives that this administration has put forth, but also budgetarily, it is unsustainable to continue to manage 4 state centers.
And that's where you went too far. And I would urge my colleagues on the Health Committee, the Human Services Committee, do not fall into the budget trap. This has nothing to do with budget. So don't buy into it. If you have any questions, don't ask them. This has nothing to do with budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I have